when we're thinking about our money, when we're thinking about our collective finances, when we're thinking about our individual finances, how can we use our financial power to further trans justice
Mhm.
and to see it as a collective benefit? Not just I'm doing this because I'm
Yeah.
trans or I'm doing this because I know someone trans, but I'm doing this because I want to live in a world where the gender binary is less harmful.
Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Duncan. I'm a financial therapist and art therapist, and you've come to the softest place to land in personal finance. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. For help with your particular situation, please seek help from a licensed professional in mental health, taxes, and finance. Here we talk about all the things we don't usually say when we talk about money. Let's begin. Today, I'm joined by Maz George. Maz is a queer, trans, non-binary coach, facilitator, and visual artist based in Brooklyn, New York. They support folks who seek greater joy, creativity, and connection. Their work focuses on embodied liberation, especially around authentic expression of gender, sexuality, and spirituality. They seek to center trans joy and trans justice. Maz is often dreaming up more equitable, integrated futures. Maz offers individual and group coaching and consulting through their business, The Kindling Kind, and has a new Substack called The Maz Show. In this episode, Maz and I talk about what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a participant and community member, what it means to invite the needed healing conversations that communities need in order to grow. Maz also gives some clear guidance about how to approach situations where you need to advocate for your safety as well as others' safety. Enjoy my conversation with Maz George. Welcome to the podcast, Maz. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm psyched to be here. Thrilled.
I would like to start out with some story time. I'd like to start by sharing the story of how we connected in the Money Healing Club. And our connection led to this conversation we're recording today and other important equity work that we are right now doing to support the club and bringing in your expertise to help the club. But this also comes from a personal story that brought us to this place I want to share. So a few months ago, during a group call in the club I was leading and you were attending, I jumped into a group activity without fully considering the potential harm in that. And during the call, I did have a sense that something was off. And I reflected on it afterwards privately, but I did not take any immediate action. I think I didn't know how, or I just sort of hoped it would blow over. And a few days later, Maz, you reached out to me on a DM to share that you did feel uncomfortable during that call and you offered to have a conversation if I was open to it, which I absolutely was, because it was also, I was like, yeah, something was off there and this is great that we can talk about it. And in that follow-up conversation, we both shared our perspectives on what happened on that call. Maz, you were so kind about pointing out my blind spots, and our conversation led to plans for changes in the club, really needed changes. And you helped identify gaps in our community guidelines, and now we're collaborating to revise those to be more inclusive and safe for all members. We're also collaborating on doing a special event for Trans Visibility Week in April, which you are going to be leading. So I'm just incredibly grateful to received feedback from you, Maz, and to engage in a conversation that was so reparative and generative for me. And it's not only created, I think, a friendship and a working relationship here, and it will benefit our entire community. So we just wanted to expand on this connection that we've had and bring Maz's expertise onto the podcast to spread it even farther. So Maz, I just want to jump in and ask you, what does repair and having generative conversations mean to you? And what are the essential ingredients?
Oh, I love this question. And I'm so glad that you're open to sharing that story because I think it exemplifies for me like what repair is all about, which is about mutual compassion. And to me, like compassion comes before comprehension. So we can always approach with that compassion and then learn and grow into our comprehension later. But like that story to me just exemplifies all that I think that repair And safety, creating safer spaces, it's really about. It's really about creating soft places to have hard conversations. And it's really about creating roots so that we are connected in our shared goal of having a different paradigm, a different opportunity. I know so many of us are raised in spaces where, I mean, I'll speak for myself and for clients that I speak to all the time, but so many of us were raised in homes where conflict resolution was not modeled
Yeah.
in a way that was very supportive. And we're here in, at least in the United States, we live in a really carceral society. It's getting more and more wild every day. And so it's really revolutionary to be like, actually, we can change this between us
Mhm.
and then we can let this ripple out. And I love that so much. And to me, like that is what repair and safety are about is being like,
Mhm.
we're going to start here in the small corner where we have the space to do this. And we're going to do it in a way that's regulated, that's compassionate, that's loving, that's curious. We're going to find our common goal. And then we're going to go from there. And then
Mhm.
we're also not going to be holding ourselves to these white supremacist perfectionist standards.
Yeah.
We don't need to get this perfect. This is messy. This is human. This is work that is always changing, is always fluctuating. It is a moving target. Even when I teach people
Yeah.
about language or pronouns, the thing I always really want to highlight is like language is fluid. Language is,
Yeah.
it fluctuates. If we met someone from 1,000 years ago who spoke English, we would have some difficulty really
Yeah.
experiencing a fluid conversation with that person. And so things are changing all the time. And part of being in safety and repair and creating it is being willing to be fluid and is being willing to be wrong and not
Mhm.
make it mean that we are a bad person. And instead, we want to change the success metric to be like, how did I show up for
Yeah.
this? Did I show up with an open and willing heart? Did I show up with an open mind? Did I really sit in myself and be willing to listen and be willing to problem solve with this person or with this community member or with this issue that we're all
Mhm.
facing? And so that's really the ingredients and that's really how I approach it and how I come to it. And it changes everything. Um, I mean, I think you know this as a leader of a community. You're like, yeah, this is part of our job that we have to do all the time is like hold this and model it.
Mhm.
And that was something I was so thrilled about in the story you were telling about us because, I am always happy and willing and excited to offer feedback and space for repair when I know that it's going to be received, when I know
Right.
that that's a mutual desire. And the times that I felt that it's not a mutual desire, that's when I have to put up my boundaries. That's when I
Yep.
have to go find a different space because that one clearly isn't safe enough for me
Right.
personally. That's one of my experiences. And so it's like, yeah, we just want to be in conversation. And we're not going to solve everything in 30 minutes or 1 hour or one mediation session, but it opens up these bigger portals and these bigger discussions. And that's something I'm so excited about with us because now it's led to like this really generative, beautiful, expansive experience that goes beyond you and I
Yeah.
and in the club and on the podcast. And that's what's so cool to me about repair is like when we get it in a way that's like embodied and regulated, we're then able to share it
Yeah.
and to like make that integrate that as part of us and as part of us our experience. And I love that.
Totally. And, the conversation, the relationship with you has changed me also in terms of my relationship as a community host and as a leader, which is kind of like a role that I feel like, well, am I? I'm just doing my little old thing, or I just hope everyone's going to be okay. But this relationship and you bringing up the topic and then me reflecting also, like, not only was it reparative and generative and but it has taught me that, like, I had the spidey sense. I absolutely did. And
Yes,
next
yes.
time, I have responsibility to follow that, not put it on someone who's maybe in a marginalized community. Oh, it's their job to teach me. I never want that to happen again. So that's been kind of a never again moment for me. And of course, I've grace with myself about that, but that, like, no, it is actually my reaching out is so important. And checking in with members maybe individually. It's tricky. We're doing group processes and I'm holding a lot and, like, it's an online community and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And but still, a community is a series of one-to-one relationships and any audiences, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's of course a network and it is greater than the sum of its parts. Um, but it's like, yeah, I knew something wasn't quite right. And it was and it was different and more than I had realized. So, I think And that's as leaders, that's when we talk about DEI, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? It's like, okay,
Totally.
we actually have more capacity for discomfort than we think. But if we're gonna like have our spikes out, then we can't have a conversation and we can't grow as
Absolutely.
people. Even you offering to like, hey, could I share it with you? I realized what a privilege that was. That like that was not your job. That was absolutely not your job. And but I knew it was important. And I liked you, Maz, and I just knew we'd have a good conversation. So I also felt safe. Like that this
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
not gonna be some awful conversation. And I'm just so glad that you felt safe enough to bring it to me.
I love hearing that, and that makes me think so much, like, I see so much leadership in the world, especially in online communities and these online coaching spaces, this leadership of, like, almost like a spiritual bypassing
Mm,
leadership energy, like, "Well, everyone here is on the same vibe, and it will be okay,
mm,
and we all love each
yeah,
other," and it's like, "Okay, that's gorgeous, but we also need someone to set the boundary and to set the guideline," and to me, leadership is it is soft and gooey in the inside, but also it needs a protective shell,
yeah,
and so it's like, how do we hold that protective shell around it, and how do we hold ourselves accountable, and I love what you're bringing up because it's like, yeah, in one way, communities are organic and they do have their own energy and their own vibe. And then in the other hand, being the leader of a community is a
yeah,
responsibility. Even when we have like the most amazing community ever that basically leads itself, we still need someone to sort of like be in a protector role
yeah,
or be in a leadership role. And um, to me, some of the most dangerous leaders I've been around are the leaders that are all talk and no action,
right.
and then you're kinda getting that lip service and you're like, "Okay, I think we're safe here because the way you're talking."
Mhm.
But then when things go down, you are unavailable for a real conversation, which is really interesting.
Okay, here's a specific question, Maz, for you. What are some strategies you have or examples, guidance for addressing a situation when things don't feel safe? And I know this is just so context dependent, obviously. But maybe we could explore a few different scenarios, right? Like we've got like, hey, let's say you're
Yeah, I
in
love
an
that.
online community or an online class. Um, what are some of your guidance? And maybe there's 2 sets, right? Are you a participant or a leader? Because
Yeah,
that's 2 different things maybe.
yeah,
What do you think about that?
absolutely. Let's start with the leader first because I think the leader really sets the container. So if you're a leader, and I teach this to a lot of people who are leaders, especially in online communities or in coaching spaces, et cetera, and I love to help people build a flexible plan so that when something does inevitably happen, we are not sitting there in shock. We're ready. You know, we as kids, we would practice fire escape. I used to live in Iceland. In Iceland, there's a very clear plan for volcano
Mm,
evacuation, very
yeah,
clear, concise, even. And so I like to think that, we have these things that we're ready and we can pull them out. So I like to help people create a plan of accountability. And it's really simple. It's like, how are we going to take care of ourselves? How are we going to create repair? And who are we going to call in as backup? I think the
mhm,
thing I see leaders do a lot, and I've also felt this in my own body, is when we witness ourselves make a mistake, we go into punishment mode. Oh my God, I have to isolate. I have to figure this out. I messed up. I need to make it right. If we have a blind spot, if we messed up, what we need is support.
mm,
So, who are your mentors? Who are your DEI experts? Who are your, what are you doing? For me, I'm a non-Black person of color. I work with Black people. I have a list of Black practitioners that
yeah,
are at the ready that I've asked if, hey, if I need a mediation, if I need help with this repair, can I call you in? Of course, I'll pay you. Can I call you in these moments? So I have a little list for myself. And in the back of my mind, I feel safer leading Black clients and supporting them because I know that if they come to me needing repair, if I harmed them, which we're in a world that is so racist. I was raised in this world
yeah,
too. I have it inside of me. It's my job to be working towards anti-racism all the time. And it's my job to be ready and able to respond and not react when someone comes to me needing repair or when someone comes to me with harm. So as a leader, it's really good to have your like very basic flexible outline of what is my plan? How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to resource myself? What repair am I able to offer? And I think we have to be really honest with ourselves in those moments. If you're too activated to have a conversation with someone, wait. Get,
yeah,
get yourself in a place where you are ready and able and rooted to have that conversation and be honest about that. Be transparent. Hey, I'm actually not available for this right now. I need to go see my therapist or my supervisor, or I need to call in some backup and I'll be available at this other time. I think that's a very responsible, respectable response. And then also having those resources like at the ready, like who are you going to talk to if something comes up?
Mhm.
And then other things for practitioners that are really helpful, for leaders that are really helpful, having an accountability form that can be filled out at any time anonymously or not
Mhm.
anonymously, but having an anonymous option is really helpful. I have one up on my link tree. You can always give me feedback at any time anonymously. It's a jot form. Your name and your email are optional. I do let people know that if you want me to reach out to you to create repair, I do need your contact. But if you want to just tell me something and not have any responsibility after that, that's a completely valid way to offer me feedback. And I welcome and support
Yeah.
that. I make that known. I think creating these spaces so that we're not always waiting for things to get really quote unquote bad before someone comes to us. So we're
Right.
creating these places to check in often and in a way that's like, my door is open. I have a channel for that. I'm ready to go for that. The other thing that I like to do, and I do this more with one on one clients than in my group work, but I always have one on one clients practice telling me no. I let them know that there's an inherent power dynamic at play, me as the coach and them as the client. I invite them to really see themselves as the expert of their life and that I am here and I am a person and I am fallible and
Mhm.
this is an art, not a science.
Mhm.
And they get to, tell me no. They get to be angry with me. They get to have feelings around what we're doing. And I'm willing and able to hold that. And so I
Mhm.
think as a leader, being rooted in your own space is so important.
Mhm.
I worked with Dr. Pavni Moray, who actually wrote a book about holding power. And I think it was 32 somatic ways to hold power. Really amazing book. And Pavni taught me one of the best things they taught me was that when someone is really sharing vulnerably, our instinct is like to lean in.
Mhm.
And Pavni was like, no, no, lean out, like
Yeah.
make space, like just hold the
Yeah.
space. And that was something that resonates with me so deeply. I think when there's harm or when we have a misstep, our instinct is like, let me get close, let me
Mhm.
create urgency, let me make repair
Let
immediately,
me
let me
fix
like,
it.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or let me get defensive and explain why I
Mhm.
didn't, or let me focus on my intention, not my impact. And
Mhm.
these are just things like, it's like, actually, we want to make sure we're rooted in our center. We want to take a breath. We want to honor and address the impact. And then we want to work on the intention and what happened between the intention and the impact that wasn't, you know, you didn't have an intention on that call to create any harm for
Right.
me. I know that
Right.
and I trust that. And so part of our discussion was like, okay, where was the breakdown
Yeah.
between the intention and the impact? And that's a really valid thing to
Oh,
start asking. And so those are my like leader
I love that.
ideas.
And when I really
And,
just want to
you
circle back,
know,
when you said
yeah,
claiming no, meaning claiming the fact that we can
yeah,
all just say no to any of this, even when
yeah.
you hired a professional or you're a client and you have, or with a therapist, like you don't have to go along with whatever they say. And it's easy to get into that power dynamic. And that really evens the playing to say everyone has consent in this situation, right?
Absolutely. I think we're so used to consumer culture. And that's part of what I like sort of attribute it to is like, I pay you, I buy the thing, you give me the healing. And I'm like, no, 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 don't book your agency at the door. I
Yeah.
don't, I don't have the answers, babe. Like what you pay me for is to hold the space and to be your teammate in this project. I don't have the answers for you. I don't know what to do. I have suggestions, I have ideas, I have experiences that we can apply, but I don't want you to check your agency at the door. And I want you to feel willing to say no. One of my mentors 8 years ago told me that it never pays to take someone somewhere they don't want to go. And I never want to take a
Yeah.
client. I never want to take a fellow leader. I never want to take a community member somewhere where they don't want to go. I always want you to feel confident and able to tell me no, to walk away, to take a break. There's so many moments where I've had clients be like, actually, that doesn't resonate. And I'm like, great.
Ah, the
Thank you for
the
telling me.
people pleaser in me that is still recovering just like healed when you said that. I mean, that's like my ongoing work, but like, oh, I could actually take a break, or I could like not do the action list that someone recommends, or not do these life hacks that people, right? Because it's like sometimes we feel like some comfort in just doing what the quote grown up in the room
Absolutely.
says, or be in deference to the person in power. But actually, like there's so much growth, and it really puts the white patriarchy on its head to break down that differential, to say that actually me saying no, me existing here, me going places only I want to go, it's so healing. That does so much repair for me, just hearing that.
I love hearing that, and that's why I practice with new clients. Like, one of our prerequisites in our first call is always like, "Okay, like, I'm gonna have you practice telling me no 3 times.
Mm,
Like, let me get it in your body so that when it comes up, you feel safe and you know my
mm,
response." It's
I
like,
love.
your no is as sacred, if not more sacred than your
Oh, can
yes,
I borrow that,
and we
Maz?
really honor that. Yeah, that comes straight from my experience in kink community.
Yeah.
That's a
Mhm.
tenet of, risk-aware kink, is
Yeah.
that your no is as sacred as your
Yeah.
yes, and that's when we really trust people. And for so many of us, like what you just said, for so many of us, just practicing that is so valuable because we didn't have a chance to practice that otherwise. I found for myself, I took a break this year from being a part of like business masterminds. And in my break, I realized, like, oh my gosh, like with the work of my therapist, I give her so much credit for this, but like, oh my gosh, I was really using transference and
Yeah.
like almost creating these like family dynamics and business masterminds where I was doing things to like almost please the other members and the person who was leading it. And it became like, wait, I
Oh,
I don't
that's
need to do that.
so live. That's so live, because I love like working with people and stuff. But then, yeah, what family role am I entering into here? Or like, give me the A plus. I'm like the A plus kid. Like, no, that I am really trying to undo that and get away from that.
And that's also why I think, like, in repair and in our healing work, celebrating every win is so important, even if it's
Yeah.
so small. Like, I always start my clients with celebrations. We always do, like, a little guided visualization, and then we do 3 to 5 celebrations, and the celebrations can literally be just like, "I'm on this call.
Yeah.
I woke up this
Yeah.
morning," because it's just like, let's really celebrate that. Like, every little thing gets to count, and I think when we are recovering from people-pleasing tendencies,
Mhm.
when we are recovering from, like, taking on certain roles in the family or in different dynamics, like, that's just so healing to be like, "Oh my gosh, I get to just show up here and be celebrated."
And it's the antidote to workaholism and productivity, focus and all of that stuff, that like, you know what? Like, me putting on clothes is actually pretty much a triumph. And I can really, I'm not saying that to be like, oh, poor little me, but like there are days where that is the case, and that is just fine.
100%, and this takes me back to sort of, like, knowing your capacity.
Yeah.
Like, if you're like, "Wow, my capacity today was put on clothes, and I'm really proud of that," then today might not be the right day for repair or
Yeah.
for conflict resolution. I for me, the metric is always like, if I'm having trouble fixing my bed, we're not gonna have the kind of day where we're gonna do any hard combos.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not
Right. Oh,
we're not
that's what I
going
tell
deep
my
on
husband.
anything.
I'm in a compliments only kind of space.
Yes,
Positive
I
feedback
love
only right now,
that.
especially when I cook a meal. I say, "What do you guys
Yes,
think? Compliments
yes.
only." Just
Yes, I love that, and then you get to know yourself more and you get to know your capacity, and then when you have a moment where you really do need to be like, "Okay, I'm gonna be rooted,"
yeah.
because I also let myself sometimes be not rooted, you know? Like,
Yeah.
okay, like, I think there's this weird burnout when we're sort of, like, trying to always be on and always
Yeah.
be perfect and always be rooted and, like, down to be adaptable, and it's like there's just we no, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So we have
I
to have
think
these
there can be
moments
a
of
layer.
low capacity.
There is a little bit of a
Yes,
costume or a coat we sometimes put on with, I guess I know I do, like, "Well,
like,
this is what I know from my graduate school training in social justice," and it's all good, but,
totally.
like, can I just speak from the heart, right? Or, like, not just from the heart, but, like, there is some
Yes,
work there, and that work is important, and just like you said, like, practicing no, the more we do it, the more, like, integral it gets, but, like, we can
absolutely.
exhaust ourselves with, like, just watching ourselves so carefully all the time, and that's why having, relationships where you can be vulnerable and you can and not have to watch yourself are so important, because then we restore in relationships.
Absolutely, and this is why, like, when I've had to, create repair with clients or with students, it's like I always go to my therapist or my supervisor or my mentor first because
Mm.
that's the place where I get to, like, let my little toddler tantrum happen. We never want that to happen with the person that we harmed. We want that to happen
So
with the
true.
people that we're compensating or we're in a relationship where we've agreed to that,
Yeah.
and that's where we get to kind of have those, like, little
Yeah,
moments
you need to
of
know where you could
our
do
own
that. Yes.
feelings.
That's funny. I have
Yes.
a financial
And
therapy
then
supervisor, and oh my gosh, Kara, if you're listening,
yes.
like the rants we have that no one will ever hear and they should never is so important though that I work it out with her and not with a client, right? Not with my friends and family.
Yes.
Yes.
And then you get to turn around and be with your client in a capacity that's actually like appropriate
Yeah.
in my mind or aligned or what we agreed to in that container. And so I think that's so important. And that's why the number one thing I tell leaders is like, do not isolate. When you make a
Yeah.
mistake, do not punish yourself and isolate. Like you need to have the place where you can have those rants, where you can have those discussions, where you can have your emotions and your anger and your narrative of I tried so hard and it met and I hate this. And like, and then you get to turn around and talk to the client or the student or the community member and be like, I am so sorry. How can I support you?
Right.
It makes me think of this circle of support, this framework I saw where it's like the people that are the most impacted get repair and support. And then, like, you go further out in the circle to get your support and your
Mm,
care. We don't want to tell the person harmed, like, how we're feeling harmed by their
right.
harm. That belongs in a different concentric circle. That doesn't belong in that space. And I think it's a really helpful framework to think of like the way that we function and who we call for what and like that's one thing I always think about leadership is like a good leader leads and they protect and they set the space but then they also make sure that they're resourced
Mhm.
and they also make sure that they have the spaces where they're being led and the spaces where they're a peer and where they're a colleague. And, it's
Mhm.
it's not like I'm a leader in every space. It's like there's spaces where I'm a student, there's spaces where I'm the mentee, and
Mhm.
then there's the spaces where I'm the leader, I'm the mentor. And I love that about something I really love about queer culture actually is that you can be like a trans and queer elder and
Mhm.
a trans queer baby at the same time. I'm
Yes.
like it's so magical that like I have people that I'm like to them I'm their elder and then to other people like I'm just the baby because they're in their
Mhm.
50s and 60s or they've been open about their gender and sexuality and exploring way longer than I have. And that's something I just love. And like I'm like I wish we had more understanding and context for that in our greater culture and not just within queer culture.
I love that. I wanna make sure we close the circle on what to
Yes,
do when you don't feel safe if you're a participant and not a leader. What are some of your I mean, I know a lot of this
love
probably
this.
overlaps, but what would you say in that particular situation?
Yeah, as a student, I think knowing what you need from a space is really important. And if you do have any identities where there's a history of violence or oppression, and you know that you need more um, safety because of that, which I really, first of all, want to validate. Like, I know for myself, I need more safety than some people that I witness, and that's completely valid and okay. That's because of my history. And wanting to make sure that you know what you need and then having no issue walking away, like really trusting that if something isn't giving you what you need, you get to walk away, you get to say no. I think also knowing what your tolerance is for giving feedback. I know my
Mm,
tolerance is pretty high because I do teach DEI as part of my job
yeah.
and I have the language and I'm ready to rock with a lot of it. I also really enjoy these conversations. That doesn't mean that every trans person or every person of color does, and they don't need to. And so, knowing what your thresholds are for me personally, and I shared it earlier, my threshold is if someone is unwilling to hear me, I don't want to be in that
Mm,
conversation.
yeah.
And, I have no issue leaving a club or a community and just gently bowing out and being like, this isn't for me. I'm going to go find a space that is for me. Um, I think that's really, really important. And I also want to just say that I think a lot of us who are in spaces where we're often the only person of our identity, or we feel like, we're more impacted by things than others because of a history of systemic oppression, we tend to think it's our responsibility to make spaces for us.
Mm.
Like, okay, no, I'm going to like figure out how to make this space better for me. And personally, I'm like, babe, you don't need that trial. Like, just you get to
That's a
walk
lot of
away.
hard
You get
work.
to go find the space.
Yeah.
It's too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
It's too much. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and like poured my heart out, written, you know, emails and plans for people. And, 5, 10 years ago was like, it's my job to make myself feel welcome here
Mhm.
because was my trauma response. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that. So finding spaces that work for you is so, so, so important. I think what you need in a space and really vetting those spaces. Those spaces do
Mhm.
exist. They can be a little harder to find, but vetting them, not checking your agency at the door, really trusting your gut. I I'm going to go back to kink for a second. I know so many people that when they get into the kink space for the first time, they'll reach out to me like, "Oh my gosh, what's your advice? I'm brand new." And I'm always like, "Okay, you're brand new in kink, but you're not brand new at life. Like you weren't
Mhm.
born yesterday. So like keep your wits about you, be in your intuition, be grounded, be rooted, stay real with yourself and be honest about what spaces are for you and what aren't for you. And enter with a little bit of hesitance. Like it
Yes.
is new. Be careful."
This, like, I feel like we're on the precipice of,
Yep.
online micro communities really blowing up. I mean, it's already happening. I think there's a collective exhaustion with
Totally.
social media. And, I've created an online community on a certain topic, and I'm part of a bunch of them as well. And I love it, love it, love it. But this is really important guidance, I think, for anyone who wants to create a community. Like, first off, like, your impulse to, I need to make my own space is totally valid. And sure, go for it. But there's also maybe more to it. Like, maybe is it your job to carve out that niche, or is there something that's already there that you can benefit from and be part of something? Like, it's not your job to break trail all the time necessarily. And then also, if you do
Yes.
want to create a community as a business, because I think everyone's like, oh, memberships, it's such easy money. First off, it's not. It's really hard. And but to, like, know this responsibility. This isn't just like, "Oh, I'll make a membership and it's great and I'll have this recurring revenue." It's sort of like having a child. Like, this is a level of responsibility. And, of course, the more tender the topic, the certainly the greater the responsibility. Which is, really, I kind of course, knew that going into this, but it keeps unfolding itself. The intersection of money and emotions is gonna continue to, bring up really tender topics. It's gonna bring people in emotional
Yeah.
states, and, to continue to look at our practices and exactly like you said, like, what's the plan? What's the repair? What is my support in all of this? So this is incredibly helpful for me, and I know I've got other community managers and community, hosts listening to this, and talk to Maz, y'all. Like, get your plan sorted out with Maz, because this is so helpful. Because when another community manager said to me, "You can only have safety when there's exclusivity." And I was actually wondering,
I disagree.
no? Okay, tell me about this. So I thought this was
I
interesting. No?
totally
Okay.
disagree. Well, I'm curious what else they said
Yeah.
before I launch
And I
into my
will say, I think the
disagreement.
context was you have safety when it's clear about what's not okay and who this isn't for. So I think that
Okay,
was
I
kind of,
think that's really valid. I think that we want to give people as much information to self-select as
yeah.
possible. And I also really hesitated the word exclusion
True.
because to me, exclusion, the history of that actually creates unsafety for the people we're excluding. Because a lot of times when we say we're excluding someone for safety reasons, we're actually pointing the finger at them and saying they're unsafe, which outs them and like makes them more vulnerable. So I've been in a lot of places where people say, no cis men are still unsafe.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, I get it. Like I totally understand. But I also think like, let's go to more of a value space.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that's why I think community guidelines and community agreements are so
Yeah.
important. And I think it's so important to really make sure that people know what they are when they agree to the space, that there's consequences, natural consequences involved, and that people know what that process is if they don't follow those community agreements.
Mhm.
Because to me, like that's like the lifeblood of any community is
Yeah.
like, what are we agreeing to in this space?
I think
And so I
that's a
think
really
that's where we build in
fair,
safety.
and I think, and maybe, like,
Yeah.
when it's about, because it's a boundary, what's okay, what's not okay.
Yeah.
And, we're really talking like psychographics and behavior, not demographics. And I think there's been so much talk about
Absolutely.
who's your niche? Well, I help women in their 30s. And actually, like, and I've really gotten away from that. Also, when I found that, like, a lot of people outside of my, like, intended niche were coming to me and I was still doing good work with, oh, no, this is a psychographic niche. If you can read,
Yes.
if
Yes.
you read
Yes.
these community guidelines, if you, read my website and that, like, vibes with you, it does not matter how tall you are or what country you're in or your gender. Like,
Yeah.
I think we need to move more into a psychographic niche when we're looking at this. And like you said, like, self-select, like, if this is going to be for you or not. And that clarity really helps. I do think that helps create that safety.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think actually, like when we separate, like we've been taught to separate by demographics, by
Yep.
gender, by age, by race, by
It's
religion,
so
by all these things.
harmful.
And that's it's still
Yeah.
harmful and it's keeping us
Yeah.
separated.
Yeah.
Like it's keeping us separated. Like I mean, my clients, I've let's see, like my age range for coaching clients is 23 to 78.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I think keeps coming up with this conversation about, oh, what we need is community. Well, guess what, babes? Community isn't all people that are just like you.
Right.
Community is someone 50 years older than you, someone 20 years younger than you. Community
Mhm.
is people with different abilities, different capacities, different skill sets, different languages, even.
Mhm.
I don't want an online community where everyone looks or acts or thinks like me.
Yes.
I want an online community where what we have done is we have agreed to some ground rules and some guidelines and some agreements so that we can honor and see each other and be safe in really experiencing our differences
Mhm.
and having that collective energy and having that space together. And I actually think that like separating by demographics is super harmful and really
Yeah.
dangerous.
I
And I
love
think
that.
it's something that has put us in danger and kept us separated. So whenever I have some come to me and they're like, I, only want to work with women and I want you to help me with the language. I'm like, okay, let's first break down why we only want to work with
Yeah.
women. Like, and look, it's valid if you don't have the resources to support a trans woman. Be
Fair
really
enough.
honest about that.
Mhm.
But let's first break that down and really get to the root of that. And you can be in progress with these things. But what I always like to tell people is like, we got to open up the table. We got to give more people seats. And then also, we got to make sure that anyone we invite to the table gets to be fed. I would
Mhm.
never have a dinner party and invite someone with a dietary restriction or
And
requirement
not
and not
feed them.
support them in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, like, have someone who's gluten intolerant to my house and only have gluten
Pizza.
items. That's ridiculous. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so we also like and that's part of also community agreements and why when I teach people how to write them and how to work with them
Mhm.
and something we've discussed is like I also want community feedback
Mhm.
because I have blind spots, you have blind spots, and we want the community to be bigger than just what we can imagine.
Mhm.
And so when we invite people into those community agreements, first of all, we get skin in the game. Second of all, we get to hear all these amazing inputs and like experiences, and we really get to make sure that people are feeling
Yeah.
safe. And and I just love, I'm like, if community agreements are really about the community, let's get them involved. Let's make it a living, breathing document. Let's make sure people feel covered and safe to engage with people who are different than themselves because these community agreements are the fabric, are the connection, are the thing that can protect us
Totally.
and are the thing we can kind of point to when we're having conflict to be like, hey, we agreed to this. This is like a mutual agreement, and we want to really honor that
Mhm.
agreement right now. And I think that's one of the reasons that we do write contracts so that when things do go awry, we have something to refer to that we wrote from a place of regulation and
Yeah.
vision and grounding.
Yeah.
So,
It's a
yeah,
boundary. A boundary. We've been
the
talking about
boundary.
boundaries this month
Exactly.
in the club, and a boundary is as much what you will do as what you won't do. And it keeps everyone
Exactly.
safe. It actually
Exactly.
like, that's the we're on the same page here that we actually want is from that kind of stuff. Not like, oh,
Totally.
we're all gonna assume we have the same values. Okay, Maz, could we talk a little bit about the event that we're gonna be doing in a little bit?
Yes.
Talk to me. Oh, wait, we just hammered out the title, everybody. The title is
We were so excited.
so excited. Word choice. Okay, it is Cultivating Trans Safety, Increasing Equity, and Addressing Queer Tax. That we're doing the week of Trans Visibility Week, first week of April, and in the Money Healing Club. So we're talking about cultivating trans safety, but also bringing in the financial and economic components of this is like a little bit of a lens into the work that you've been doing. And we've been having a lot of fun working on these slides and stuff. Could you share a little bit about this and what you're excited about?
I'm very excited about this. I think looking at it from a financial lens is so interesting and exciting and also can help more people relate to it because so many of us can relate to what it feels like to feel limited or to not have access to certain things, to feel pigeonholed into certain jobs or career choices. And, one thing I always talk about privilege is like privilege is a difference of what's on the table.
Mm.
We don't all have the same access to the same options.
Yep.
And so often we hear people criticize people's options, but you didn't know what the menu they were choosing from looked
Hmm.
like. And when we talk about the queer tax, I mean, we've heard so much about the pink tax.
Hmm.
Okay, I've heard people talk about the ADHD tax. Well, there's also a queer tax, there's a
Absolutely.
trans tax, and it's so important to really acknowledge the reality that legislation, that limited access has on people's real lives, has on their real mental health, has on their bank accounts. And there's this excellent, excellent documentary that Laverne Cox made called Disclosure.
Mm.
And it talks about the representation of especially Black trans people in the media. It talks more about all kinds of trans people in the media in the 90s and early 2000s and the 80s as well. But it mostly focuses on Black trans people, which are some of the most vulnerable
Yeah.
people in the trans community, especially Black trans women and Black trans femmes. And I think it's so important to really honor this. And I heard your conversation with River Nice, and you talked a lot about mutual aid, which I really appreciated. And something that I think is so important, River was talking about coming to mutual aid with this feeling of like, we it's not like I have more and I want to give you something because that is like an inherent River explained it way
Yeah,
better
like it's
than I'm doing. I'm
transactional.
just paraphrasing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
transactional. Thank you. Thank you. And I think so often with trans justice or with trans issues or with queer issues, we think like, okay, like I can be an ally, I can support them, or okay, this affects me because I have a child that's trans or I have a cousin that's queer, etc. But really, we are so interconnected.
Yes.
And trans people and queer people are at the front lines of sexual and gender liberation. And we are all benefiting from the work that is being done.
Yes.
And the reason that I'm so excited to be teaching this right around Trans Day of Visibility is because visibility without safety is a trap. And we know it. It makes you a target, it makes things more dangerous. And one of the ways that people create safety is through financial abundance.
Yeah.
And to not have access to financial options or abundance it does create danger.
Yeah.
And it does create moments of really challenging decisions and moments of violence and oppression. And so that's something that I'm really excited to talk about is when we're thinking about our money, when we're thinking about our collective finances, when we're thinking about our individual finances, how can we use our financial power to further trans justice and to see it as a collective benefit? Not just I'm doing this because I'm trans or I'm doing this because I know someone trans, but I'm doing this because I want to live in a world where the gender binary is less harmful. And I'll be honest, the gender binary harms everyone.
Yes.
For some people, it's annoying and painful, and for some people, it's fatal. And so there's a spectrum of harm. But I have taught classes like this to thousands of people, and I know because I see it in my DMs, in my email, in my inbox, like I know how many people have been harmed by this. And I think there's this thing that where we talk about like gender inequity and we talk about men and women and feminism. Amazing. Great. Okay. We got to expand that discussion. It has to include queer and trans people. It just has to. And I think that's something that is so important to start to look at. And what the work you're doing, to me, it's so liberatory, teaching people about personal finances so that they can have more agency in this space. It's so important for anyone impacted by the patriarchy, by white supremacy, by, exploitative capitalism. So I'm like, this is a trans issue. This is a queer issue. And then we want to be folding in other queer and trans issues so that people are aware of them and people know that they exist. And as we work to liberate ourselves, we're also making sure that rising tides raise all boats.
Yeah.
We're making sure that everybody in our community is safe and healthy and, has access.
And there's an aspect of navigating a broken system, but heck, I would rather navigate it with people than alone. Because then the
100%.
Because then the broken system will hurt you more. But if we link arms, like that is how we protect ourselves as well as instigate change. I mean, this is what happens. We read the Financial Activist Playbook last month in the club, and that really brought about a lot like, oh, I can learn to like, quote, be good with money and be an agent for change where I don't donate all my money away. Right? Like that is that transactional thing, right? And we had such a good conversation about that actually River joined, which was so lovely. So yeah, those are, oh man, we have so many great resources. I'm going to put all of these. I'll find all of these resources, Maz, that you're referencing, and I will put them all in the show notes because this is so good. Okay.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone come.
I love that.
Join the
I'd love to add one more thing to
Please,
that if it feels possible. I think the other thing too that I was so amazed with your conversation with River and your podcast with River is like the ingenuity, the creativity, and the joy. Like I think we talk so much about trans issues, and something we talk a lot about in trans community is trans joy. And trans joy is so powerful and so magical. We can learn so much from it. It can just be like such an inspirational space. And there's ingenuity, and the diversity of our communities is what helps us have ingenuity and helps us be really creative and get out of these paradigms of like individual, you know, like the individual focus we've been taught. So that's something that I also am like, yes, why are we not, why are we not working with each other? Because we all have such different strengths and we can bring so much into the space, but we need to feel safe enough to do that. We need to feel safe enough to be together in community.
Exactly. And we all learn better when we feel safe. We learn and we grow when we feel safe. When we don't feel safe,
Totally.
we can't learn and grow. It's just the fact of the matter.
Totally.
So, Maz, I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests. I want you to go with a first intuitive hit, or if you've already prepared, that's just fine. But something I ask is, I want you to picture your money as a creature, real or imagined. What is the first thing that comes to mind? Don't overthink it. You can just be intuitive. What's the first image hit you get?
Yeah, I feel like you're gonna really, I'm like, oh no, you're gonna really see me.
Oh, no, okay.
Oh no, so wonderful. Well, my first intuitive hit was like a new baby dolphin, and then my next intuitive hit was like a wild beast. So somewhere between a new baby dolphin and a wild beast.
It's always right. And maybe there's some combo here. Yeah. And as with this image, what does this image, this creature, and maybe it's sort of like forming as we're talking a little bit, what does this creature want for you?
Definitely space, spaciousness.
It wants space for you. Yeah. Yeah. It might have some ideas for how that can happen too. These are, talk about allies. These
Yes.
internal parts we have can be such great allies for us as well. And our creative, visual parts of our brain are is a very wise thing with our money. So thank you. Okay, will you let me know if that image comes to clarity? Will you, if you would like to share?
Yeah, I'm gonna go journal about it because I'm like, wow, what a
Okay.
different. I had such a dichotomy. I guess I'm in a moment of real transition.
Yeah, that's okay. And maybe there's two. So there's no right or wrong. Well, this is wonderful, Maz. Thank you so much for the time and to really share the work that you do and also who you are. It's all, I know it's kind of one and the same, but I really appreciate you sharing all of this. You're incredibly wise, and I am psyched to know where you're going to be in 5 years. It's going to be huge. It's going to be beyond. It's going to be absolutely beyond on like expert level shit. So I just so appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you for making the club for us and like holding the space and being a leader that's open to exploring ways to grow together. It means so much. It's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. So I really appreciate that. I heard you on a podcast about a year ago and I was like, I just must know more. I just have to know more. So thank you so much.
I love talking. Thank you, Maz. Thanks for listening to the Money Healing Club podcast. You can find resources and links from this episode in the show notes at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd probably really love my free email course on curbing impulse spending with compassion and mindfulness. Check it out at moneyhealingclub.com/challenge. Do you have a question about how financial therapy might help you? Leave me a voicemail at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast and I might answer your question in a future episode of the pod. We are in this together and I really appreciate it.